When it comes to Overwatch's resident robotic ninja Genji, you'll generally land in one of two camps. The stealthy cyborg is either a completely broken, overpowered monster that should be nerfed into the ground, or he's a weak pick, too underpowered to be considered useful. There's no doubt he's unbelievably fun to play. Who doesn't love doing a bit of parkour off a wall and then slashing down on your enemies from a great height? But with one of the highest skill ceilings in the game, he's a pain to master and even more of a pain to use when the meta just isn't built for him. Which means his usage across the board among normal players is more up and down than he is. Don't worry though, it's not just the casual player base who can't make their mind up on Genji. The pros are just as likely to drop him the second he or one of his enablers like Ana gets a nerf, only to immediately go crawling back to him as soon as the devs decide to give him a little boost again. Whiplashing from an essential member of any team comp to a D-tier pick in a matter of weeks as devs desperately try to keep the acrobatic assassin's feet firmly on the ground. Not exactly easy when he can double jump and climb walls. This is the story of Overwatch's most up and down hero and why the ever-shifting meta just won't let him rest. Before we go any further though, grab your ninja stars and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell notification. And let us know down in the comments why you think Genji doesn't deserve to have nice things like meta viability. Before we can look back though, we must first look to the present. And right now, Genji's in a bad way. The fact is, he's just very counterable as it stands, and he struggles for the same reason that the likes of Doomfist are stuck to the bottom of the Overwatch League pick board. The pros have seen fit to make use of Genji's particular set of skills only 3.6% of their DPS match time, making him the 5th least used hero in the league this season, with only the aforementioned brawler Doomfist, Junkers, Roadhog and Junkrat, and obviously Bastion propping up the pile beneath him. Ironically, the dive meta that once Genji himself was a key part of has moved on without him, and it's now the main reason he can't get going in the Overwatch League. His more melee, up close and personal style struggles against some of the biggest threats in this meta, easily dealt with via Wrecking Ball Boop, Zarya and even Winston's bubbles, or basically any hit scan DPS worth their salt. This meta just wasn't made with Genji players in mind. Even in casual play, Genji's usability has taken a bit of a hit, possibly due to his plummeting win rate. He's a high risk, high reward hero, and that kind of perilous playmaking just isn't suitable at the high end of the ladder, even with a recent buff to his fire rate giving his DPS a little more spike. The likes of Echo and Sombra carry dive far better than him, and without an Ana to get Nanoblade up and running, he actually gets very little done in neutral fights. Truth is, Genji players can often fall into the trap of being a bit predictable once you get to the higher levels, and in pro play especially, being easy to read makes you far too vulnerable to be viable. If you find yourself flanking, deflecting, firing, and then dying every time you clock in as Genji, then you can see the issue that he's got. Back in the distant past though, 2018, for those of you keeping track, Genji was at the top of his game, and the 2018 dive meta is a prime example of why Genji can be so OP one week and then absolute garbage the next. 2018 saw a Genji in the ascendancy, fresh from a set of shiny new buffs, reducing his hitbox size and preventing his Dragon Blade from being interrupted by a well-timed stun or hack. Genji was back in the game, mainly thanks to his exceptional synergy with one of the most famous meta comps in Overwatch League history, the dive comp. Working alongside a tank core of D.Va and Winston, at least back then, Wrecking Ball is the teammate of choice nowadays, and a DPS teammate of Tracer, Genji could be used to devastating effect, especially when he was backed by a Zenyatta and Lucio support core. His movement abilities meant he was more than capable of attacking the high ground around enemy teams with ease, pressuring high priority targets, and being able to dance around the objective without taking too much damage to halt opposition progress in its tracks. On the offensive, a speed boosted Genji could burst forward and eviscerate supports and enemy DPS with little to no effort, and once that first kill was secured, the team fight was all but won. The likes of Fleta, who was then a Seoul Dynasty player, and Profit, turning out for London Spitfire, set the pro scene alight with their high-class Genji plays, until suddenly they didn't. Following a dominant year, Genji's usage fell off a cliff going into 2019, a fall he wouldn't recover from until 2 years later. 2019 and early 2020 were barren years for our dear Genji. The death of dive comp as we knew it, and the introduction of the 2-2-2 roll lock completely devastated his viability. Simply, Genji didn't fit into the metagame anymore. His best enablers weren't seeing regular play, the support roster were superb at countering him, and the DPS pool being as wide and all-encompassing as it is, there were a number of heroes who just did the job far better than he ever could. But Genji is a yo-yo character for a reason, and as devs began to pump the augmented assassin with more and more buffs, the meta scales began to shift in the ninja's favour once more. First came an ammo buff in December 2019, adding an extra 6 shuriken to Genji's standard arsenal. Not exactly game-changing, but a welcome boost nonetheless. Fast forward to June 2020, and for a period of about 6 weeks, the devs and the pro scene lost its mind over Genji, boosting his base damage, reducing the recovery for his shuriken secondary fire, increasing the duration of his deflectability, and allowing players to manually cancel it, brought Genji back into the fold with a vengeance, and he delivered. The Overwatch League's legendary weekend of upsets coincided with Genji's long-awaited resurgence, and for many, the lore of that series of surprising results is intrinsically tied to the ninja's return to the top table. Ask any caster at the time, and the usual suspects of San Francisco Shock in the Western split and Shanghai Dragons in the East were fully expected to romp home, dispatching any who stood in their way. But that is not how it went down. Shock suffered a surprise defeat to Paris Eternal, and Shanghai came up short against Guangzhou Charge, and all the while, Genji lurked away in the shadows. The pros who had waited so long were finally able to unleash the full power of the cybernetic ninja onto the unsuspecting meta, and the level of skills on show was something to behold. But sadly, predictably, Genji's latest chance in the spotlight was always doomed to be a short one. His prevalence in every match and the ability of some players to completely tear up a team single-handedly demonstrated to fans and pros alike that his most recent buffs were far too overtuned to be left unchecked. The hero pool, designed to force teams into making diverse comps by banning certain heroes during some weeks of the Overwatch League, meant Genji was mercifully for some taken out of proceedings, and while he had his feet up, the devs set about undoing their supposed mistakes. And by the end of August, Genji had yo-yoed right back down into an obscure off-meta pick, and the notoriously unbalanced ninja has been stuck in a metagame mire ever since. But you should never rule out the youngest Shimado brother, and there is potentially good news on the horizon, a glimmer of hope that the dragon may yet rise again. After another year in the shadows, Genji's usage in the Overwatch League has slowly started to creep up again, seeing a decent couple of hours in the hands of the league's best DPS players throughout August. While the likes of Shanghai's Fletter don't really have much reason to not pick Echo right now, and even semi-viable Genji is deadly in those hands. And now that the new and improved dive comp appears to be here to stay for the foreseeable, Wrecking Ball and D.Va certainly aren't going anywhere, there is a chance that the ninja everyone loves, or loves to hate, could yet carve himself out a niche in the team comp he once called his own. As long as players can find a way to keep him out of Wrecking Ball based trouble, of course. If they can do that, and devs allow him to keep pace with Overwatch's other melee brawler Doomfist in the race to the top, then don't be surprised to see Genji yo-yo up and down the meta a couple more times before Overwatch 2 finally lands on our screens in the near future. He's had his ups, and he's certainly had his downs, but there could be life in this old dragon yet.